Charlie Yaxley. He's the global spokesperson for the UNHCR. Charlie, good to have you on the show. Looking at the data, I'm seeing that the route from Western and Eastern Africa all the way up to the Mediterranean coast is perhaps the world's deadliest migrant route. We have at least 1,750 deaths along this route. I mentioned some of the things that they had to endure, whether it's dehydration, starvation. These are some of the more hearable ones. But if you could just give me some specific examples of some of what the report says in terms of unspeakable brutality and humanity in the hands of smugglers.
Well, what our report has found is that there are thousands of these acts taking place on these routes. And first of all, with the deaths, because these things are happening or almost in the shadows in places where humanitarian agencies and security organizations can't reach them, the focus is not there in the same way as, for example, with the Mediterranean sea crossings issue. But this report strongly suggests that there are more deaths happening on these land routes. And those who survive are suffering extreme abuses. We've had testimonies to our staff of people who are being held by traffickers, being burnt with oil, having plastic melted onto them, being electrocuted, all to extract ransom payments. And in general, the traffickers treat these people as nothing more than a commodity to trade. When riding through the desert on overcrowded vehicles, if someone falls off and is injured, the car does not stop. It's considered like nothing more than if a suitcase had fallen off the back and the journey continues. That's the attitude of the perpetrators of these abuses here.
Very sad story. You have nearly 2,000 people that have died along these routes, but for those people that actually survive, the many men, the many women, the many children, they often get out of this with very lasting and severe mental health issues as a result of the traumas that they face, right?
Yeah, that's right. Many of the people who our teams come across, and often our teams see them at the end of their journeys, either when they're disembarked from a boat to Europe, or when our teams are able to reach them in Libya, or perhaps when they're evacuated to other countries elsewhere. But many of them are in need of intensive psychosocial care to address some of the real severe traumas they face. Now, the fact that this is happening is a stain on our collective conscience. This isn't the first report of its kind that has come out, but it is something that one of the first reports that shows what's happening in which locations and by who. So we hope that this very powerful report does not generate what can often happen, these feelings of hopelessness or questions about what do we do about this, but actually that some of the concrete recommendations we've made about how to address this are now finally engaged with, and there's concerted action and strong leadership from states and the international community to prevent these horrific acts.
Let's talk about that. You said this is not the first report, and there's obviously a stain on our collective consciousness as humanity. So what's it going to take to stop these cruelties and to protect these victims, and possibly, most importantly, to prosecute those who actually are the perpetrators of these illegal acts?
Well, there have been areas of progress. We have had some smugglers and traffickers identified by UN sanctions committees. They've then been put under sanctions. And then when they then travel can then be arrested. There's ways to follow the money and see who is controlling these networks, freeze those financial assets, stop the money, you stop the business model, and you can break these down. But there has to be greater cooperation amongst states here. We need intelligence agencies and police and security forces to be sharing information with each other, to be tracking these people and working together. And of course, when it comes to state officials, there needs to be thorough and complete investigations into any allegations of abuse, protection for victims and witnesses so they do feel able to come forward and testify, and then criminal prosecutions for those found to have committed these awful acts.
A very good light shed on a very devastating story by your organization. All right, Charlie Yaxley, thank you very much for speaking to us here on the NewsHour. I do appreciate it.